This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 53.
First with station rotation is that what you can do is you can develop stations, for example, within your LMS that relate to different tasks for that day. So you can create a different topic that's associated with
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, almost as always, Mr. Matt, the King of Data Rogers. Matt, how was your holiday break?
You know, I wish this episode was coming out tomorrow, but my holiday break was chaotic. I feel like it always is. I don't know if you feel this way, Ken, but you probably don't. You're way more prepared than I am, but I'm shopping on Christmas Eve for the last minute gifts, and I'm wrapping on Christmas morning before anyone wakes up, and then realizing that I have to host, so I need to cook. It's just an absolute mess. So luckily, Kristen and I escaped from Pennsylvania down to North Carolina during the week. It rained apparently for you guys all week long. And it was like 80 degrees, and I was on a beach in a bathing suit having a great time. So it was everything I needed. I want to go back there now, and we're only 2 days into the new year, new teaching year, but such is life. And it was nice to see my kids. So how was your holiday break?
Well, I just want to say before I answer that, I was very proud of you for detaching and going away and actually shutting down the device. And I know you don't have email on your phone, and so you were as disconnected as you probably have been in a while. And I think it's super important. I challenged my instructional coaches to do the same. I have a group of new teachers that I kind of focus on and check in with once in a while. And I emailed them 2 days before break, and I said, I literally want you to shut down your computer when you leave, and I don't want you to turn it on until at least January 2nd. Like you have to break yourself from it, and you come back more refreshed. You come back more productive. There's so many benefits that are from there. My break was fantastic. You know, with my kids at this age, like Christmas is just the absolute best. They were so excited about everything. The magic was just incredible. So it was an awesome time. The best Christmas by far for my wife and I, just to see with the kids. So we're back at it. This episode will be out later in January, but we have a fantastic guest tonight, Matt Rhoads, who, was possibly or definitely the better Matt of the episode. Even the better Matt R. But he brings a diverse experience. But what I really appreciated about him is we grilled him with some pretty tough questions, and he didn't fluff his way out of the answers. I mean, we asked him on the spot for practical examples, really kind of played devil's advocate at times, and he gave succinct, concrete, like real answers that was not just kind of skimming the surface. What were your thoughts about that?
I've long had this thought, and I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but I feel like educators that leave education, and they're still in the education world, whether it's an ed tech coach, an admin position, curriculum and instruction, you start forgetting what it's like to be in the classroom. And so because of that, your examples become more general, and your problems become way simpler to solve. Like I think about a classic old school college professor that's like, oh, just try this, like, I don't know, wind chime, and they hear that, and all the kids sit down and they'll be in their seats and they won't be talking. Like, in their brain, they've kind of lost the truth of what it is to be in the classroom and all the directions that it goes. And to see Matt have such a connection and a grasp with what it's like to be in a classroom while also advising people that are in the classroom is really refreshing. And what, as someone who's supporting teacher, I would love to have him on my staff. I would love to be learning from him every day, because I think he meets his educators where they're at with empathy and understanding, but also challenge to make the learning experience better. And that's that perfect balance that we're all searching for. You know, Ken, I've heard 50 some episodes of the same examples from you. You've been out of the classroom so long, you're so detached at this point. Eventually, we'll have 50 more episodes of the same stories, but not for Matt.
Exactly. So we had the better Matt and the better instructional coach all in one package for our show tonight. But we really jump into practical instructional strategies. We dive deep on ed tech and data literacy and how those kind of lines blur together. And I think it'll be incredibly insightful for experienced teachers, eye opening for newer teachers, and a jump start to a lot of the things that you can find further on his website, his blogs, his books. So, I think this podcast is a great introduction to what Matt Rhoads is doing. So, without any further delay, let's bring in the better instructional coach and the better Matt, Dr. Matt Rhoads from San Diego, California. Hi, Matt. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I mean, I'm just finishing up my last couple days of break and dealing with a home renovation and a lot of other projects before I go jump back into my role. But it's been good, and I'm pretty well rested. Although I know that this next couple months is going to be a big tidal wave, so we'll see definitely how it goes. But I'm ready to jump back in.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing like a classic teacher on holiday break using their time to take care of all the personal stuff, so you don't actually get that rest, but it's still a nice clean break from the daily grind of education. So to kick things off, why don't you officially introduce yourself to our audience, where you're coming from, and just kind of a snapshot of what your journey in education has looked like for us.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Matt Rhoads. I'm from San Diego, California, and I am a EdTech integrationist and instructional leader for a consortium of adult schools. And I also work at San Diego State University in the dual language and English language learner program. And I help mentor and coach student teachers, as well as I lecture on EdTech from time to time. And I also do some consulting work, working with some ed tech companies here and there, and writing books, blog, and then just my own podcast as well. So it's been quite a busy year. It's been a fun year, and my journey has was in the classroom about 7 years, teaching special education, as well as being the tech coach on campus at a large high school campus. And I've taught literally everything under the sun at the secondary level, from math to social sciences to English, almost every single grade level within co-taught, as well as specialized academic instruction settings. And my dissertation's on data literacy, data-driven decision-making, but kind of goes hand in hand with ed tech. So kind of catapulted me to a lot of different things that I have my hands in right now. And yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me and a little bit about my work. Definitely, I'm lucky to have hands. I think I can walk into a kindergarten class, first grade class, fifth grade class, then I can jump into a computer coding class and English as a second language class for adults, and then working with grad students myself. So in a single day. So I think that I'm pretty blessed to see kind of across the board what's going on.
So I want to kick things off with kind of a specific question for a specific listener, not someone I know, but someone in a position of teaching. So a teacher that's been in, let's say, in the game for 7 to 20 years, maybe even 30 years, and they kind of have this itch of like possibly becoming an instructional coach or an ed tech coach, because we see that position growing more and more across districts. Everywhere we look, districts are realizing the return on investment when they're bringing these positions into their districts, and it's usually teachers that maybe like have been encouraged to pursue admin, but they never really wanted to, or they got their admin cert, but then they realize like it's not what they want to do. But there's this kind of in the middle position where you are a teacher, but you have a leadership position in your district. What would you say to someone that is questioning whether or not they should do that, or they don't know if it's the right time yet or not? Just any advice for what that transition is like from leaving the daily grind of the classroom, but still not reaching the thresholds of administration.
I think it's a good in between land because essentially you get a seat at the table as a stakeholder in a lot of leadership decisions, but you also get to build the relationships with teachers, and you're in classrooms all the time. You don't essentially leave the classroom. I mean, a coach, you're in the classroom, hopefully as much as possible, and building relationships with teachers, co-teaching with them, coaching, working with students. And to me, it's a lot of fun because you get your hands in a lot of different things, and it's not the same type of, I think, pressure as being a full-on principal or someone that's within the superintendent's office or head of curriculum or that type of thing. So it's a good in between place, and it's all about building relationships. And if you're ready to continue to build relationships that with students and teachers and school leaders, as well as you feel like you have something to provide in terms of instruction, your knowledge of ed tech, or how to coach, then I think it's a good idea to jump in. It's never too late to try, or never too late to learn how to do it. And I think it's been fun, and it's been game changing in my career. So I highly recommend it.
So, being kind of topical right now, I know that you've done some work or at least blog posts about the current status of education and what that looks like. And in your role, and this can go to Ken as well as Matt, you guys have been the one-stop shop for a classroom that has to go virtual, or transitioning materials between hybrid, or supporting a teacher that has 2 kids that are quarantined but are 18 kids still in the classroom. What has your role been, and what have you found as maybe the silver lining of education through that experience? Because I think that, at least I'll say this and then I'll let you guys jump in. I finally feel like I'm catching a rhythm, and I know we've been doing this for almost 2 years now. I finally feel like I know how to structure it in a way that's actually academically beneficial for my kids. But you guys, I run one class with one set of kids. What have you, in your role, seen as the positives, the biggest challenges, and maybe the best way to view um, almost having stamina for that email that we dread saying, oh, these 3 kids are gone, or you know what, send devices home with kids because the next 3 days everyone's going to be virtual. What have you guys learned over the last 2 years?
So I believe that the districts who've been innovative and have been trusting of their teachers and using teachers across the door from each other, as well as being already highly invested in ed tech, having a good learning management system, having some of that basic training in place, I think that those districts have been more successful in terms of that capacity building across the board. If you have more forward thinking and trusting leaders, then it percolates across the board. I've seen teachers to really revolutionize their ability to use technology in the class. And I think that if a district really invests in a learning management system and a number of tools that go around it, that infrastructure, and teachers are able to then, be coached by an instructional coach, and have that ability to watch other teachers do this, I think that those are in best positions to succeed. However, the districts who have chosen not to do that and just thought of the traditional approach, those districts are suffering and those teachers are suffering because they're essentially not using an LMS, and um, they're having to go back to sending packets, or the kids aren't even learning at home, or they have no idea how to do a good station rotation with students that are in person or online. So um, those are just kind of my feelings about that. Ken, what do you think?
Yeah, actually, what I would love to have you dig into is, can you provide some insight? What is a great way to do station rotation with in a blended environment? That's something that I was really trying to support with teachers last year. So I'll jump on the train after that, but I would love to hear your advice on that.
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, if for example you have a group, so we're not talking about concurrent here where you have students online and in person at the same time. Let's just first talk about a group of students that are online, that are there, just traditional hybrid blended, and then we'll talk about concurrent. So first, with station rotation, is that what you can do is you can develop stations, for example, within your LMS that relate to different tasks for that day. So you can create a different like topic that's associated with. So say for math, you're doing I don't know, factoring, and you want to do manipulatives as one of the stations. So say for example you develop something on Google Draw that's the math manipulative station where they need to make certain fractions using those manipulatives. Or for example, you can have an asynchronous um, Pear Deck where they are working on that. Then the next station could be maybe they're watching a video, or you're doing the instruction, you're modeling it for the students, and that's where you get to work on that. Then you have another station where they're working on iReady, where it's adaptive ed tech, where they get to practice those skills. And you can design the lessons for the students, or they can have their own individualized, tailored experience. So, and when you're doing that blended situation, is that you can provide that instruction by demonstrating what each of those stations are, and then just letting your students start at any of those stations. I think the biggest success for station rotation is not to really have that essential start station. Make sure the students can start at any of the stations and rotate as they can go. That makes it so much easier versus having to start at a specific station and end at a specific station, given that you could have students out, you could have a variety of different things going on. So that's what I recommend, just for you could do 3 stations, you could do 6 stations, you could do as many as you'd like. I tend to like having my stations be between 12 and 15 minutes. So that's generally what I like to do in an hour block, or you can do it in an hour and 20-minute block, depending on what you want to do. Then let's talk about concurrent. You can do essentially blended learning within a concurrent type scenario where you have students online and in person simultaneous, where the expectation is providing some sort of synchronous instruction during that time. What I like to do is having the students meet in a synchronous environment using an interactive slide like Pear Deck to build community, social emotional learning, then do your formative assessment, and then break down into the stations where you have essentially a lot of the same stations being available online as well as in person. And you do essentially the same thing that I discussed with the blended with just the blended learning station rotation model, with students working online and in person. And I think districts that have invested in a tool like GoGuardian, being able to see everyone's screen, a device, whether they're home or in person, really helps. And you can be monitoring that if students get lost, or you can see where they're currently at. And you can use breakout rooms for the students online to rotate them, or um, you could just keep them within the same type of room, depending on what you want. And then at the very end, you bring everyone back and you do that formative assessment at the very end to see wherever all the students are at before moving on to the next sequence. So that's kind of just in a nutshell what I recommend for concurrent in that blended station rotation piece.
I mean, that was fantastic advice in a very short amount of time, and I guess I'll add on maybe some enhancements to what you were saying. I think one of the best strategies, whether you're in blended or you're still just in a very traditional setting when it comes to station rotations, is utilizing screencasts to explain the directions, or one, instructionally to explain a skill, but even at a very basic level is just explaining the directions of a station. Bringing those screencasts in, they don't have to be fantastic. It can be super simple, but that provides you upfront time that maybe you don't have to explain the station. If the screencast is clear enough and you have a group of students appropriate that can handle it by just watching it and doing it, especially if it's not their first time. And then, with the concurrent piece, I think one of the biggest challenges is, the grouping of students. How do you group the students when you have, let's just keep it simple, 50% are online attending via Zoom and 50% are in front of you face to face? And when it comes to station rotation, I mean, hopefully you're using data to group your students based on the skills that you're teaching, and that's how you're pulling your groups. But the reality is that might be extremely more difficult when you have 50% online. So, I would just always encourage teachers, just look at the skill that you're teaching and determine, using your expert knowledge, how much do I have to differentiate? If you don't feel you have to differentiate a lot, then keep it easy on yourself and meet with all in-person kids in group 1 and meet with all Zoom kids or online kids in group 2. Don't feel like you have to mix and match them constantly. But at the same time, you do want to mix that in because you want to bring them into the community of the classroom, like you had said, with Pear Deck or other things. So, I mean, it's no easy task or challenge, but there's definitely ways to do it as best as you possibly can. And what I love about blended station rotations, even if they're in front of you, is I feel like you just have more flexibility with time. And you kind of alluded to that. You might not feel as rigid with the 12-minute, all right, everybody's got to move, because you can just pull the next group and tell them to just pause whatever they're doing on their device. And definitely the piece of not having a specific start point, I think, is important with regardless the format that you're delivering them in. So, aside from that, what would you say has been one of the other roadblocks or big hurdles for teachers that perhaps weren't using too much technology 2 years ago, and ways they've had to adjust and adapt their instruction, that they've actually found extreme benefit in the integration of technology?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you both have seen across the board, teachers being first, barely even able to open their Google Drive and share documents, to being able to do sophisticated things that we're discussing amongst a lot of different types of tools. So I would say that teachers that have been invested in doing this longer, definitely we've seen that capacity build. I think just with the ones that have been struggling over time, it's constantly just showing the basics over and over again for them to learn. And that definitely has been the most difficult aspect. But I recommend mostly is to work with them and actually go into their classroom and co-teach with them and show them the power of how you facilitate the instruction using the EdTech integrated, because then you can show them like, hey, you can use formative assessment, which, in the historically was, you could say like an exit ticket where they had a piece of paper. And to me, that was rarely ever executed very well, I thought. And you can't provide that much feedback directly at the end of class or during that moment of time with that exit slip. But now you can see everyone's answer at the same time and provide whole class feedback, as well as personalized feedback. And the research says is that if you can provide that whole class feedback and just say, like, you're doing a math problem and you see these 3 common errors, you could discuss those 3 common errors and pinpoint that. And you can do that pretty seamlessly with a lot of the tools that we have now, especially with interactive slides. So co-teaching with them and showing them the power of how to do it, and just showing how effective that can make them in terms of their instruction, I think is really the most successful way of, building that skill at really essentially any level of capacity that you have among the teachers you have on, at that building.
All right, I want to jump in on this because I think, and again, I'll take both of your perspectives because mine is slightly different, right? So I use technology heavily in my classroom, and I've loved watching both kids and teachers. You know, being a tech integrator or a tech coach is not new. It didn't evolve in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. It just required people to raise their digital competency at an insanely quick rate, um, because that was their professional responsibility. So I'm not typically a pessimistic type. I like to consider myself realistic. But do you feel like the element of your role, both of your role, is somewhat limited now as a tech integrator because, much of your time was spent bringing really great ideas to people that were early adopters and just driving that digital competency up to meet those other people and then get inspired by the early rollers with technology. I know as myself, right now I feel almost burnt out of the use of technology. At least the elementary level, I'm looking at a tool and recognizing that it has to be in my toolbox, but it can't be my only tool. I'm not walking around a job site with only one Phillips head screwdriver, right? Like I'm not doing Nearpod for every single lesson, even though it's a great tool, right? It's the classic death by Kahoot situation that we dealt with years before. How do you feel like in your role you're establishing job security? And I don't mean that in a true sense, but as everyone starts to feel, hey, I'm pretty good at this technology, I got a grasp of it. How are you reinventing your role to make sure that in the longevity, you continue to push every group of people? Because I know from my end, I'm saying, I'm good. I'm happy. You know what? Oh, you could show me a breakout. That was neat. That was fun. It was engaging. It was a lot of work. Well, what are you doing to continue to drive growth through your clients, I guess is the best way to put it.
So I think just for speaking for myself is that, as you know, technology is increasing at an incredible pace. And not everyone can keep up, nor can I keep up with the technology. But what we can do as instructional coaches and tech coaches is to learn the research behind how we learn and take those philosophical principles that are grounded in the research and integrate them with the newer technology that's coming out. And I think teachers, as well as just educators across the board, have to come to the realization. I tweet about this quite often, and I did it the other day. I said, every single teacher is going to have to, in the next 5 to 10 years, coming out and as a veteran, is going to be being able to teach in an online, in person, and blended environment. You need to be competent in all three. If you're not competent in all three, then you're not going to be able to, I think, thrive in the later portion of the decade. And I think that there is obviously that pushback on the technology piece, and that's totally fine because you don't do everything in your life with technology, but you do quite a bit of it with technology. And I think going back to this idea of stations and going back to this idea of different types of technology, it's not about the tool usage. You could have a million different tools, but it comes down to having tools, about 3 to 5, that you can really create with and be innovative with. Because I think tools over time, it's not that large of a learning curve if you know about 5 or 6 of them. They're very similar across the board, right? So it comes down to taking the principles of learning and integrating them with the tools so that the students can be creative and innovative. So, for example, design thinking. Teach them the design thinking protocol, but use a tool like Google Workspace, and then use WeVideo or something where they can create an advertisement based on their prototype that they've developed through the design thinking protocol and have them reflect upon it through that same type of mechanism and share it with their classmates on whatever platform. So that's just an example. I think it's just only going to ever accelerate. And although you could have more of a pessimistic view where, there's going to be such a high capacity where it's not going to be needed. But I think just with anything in life, it's changing. And I think if you take the pedagogy and the strategies and use them with the tools, you're going to be continuing to innovate. And as you see with the different jobs and careers are constantly changing. So we're going to continually have to upskill what we're currently doing with our students, and teachers are going to have to learn that. So
Yeah, just to add on to that, I love how you classified it as, knowing the research and the principles of learning. And I think it's been great over the last 2 years that we've accelerated the, aptitude of technology integration for most teachers. It's being involved more, but at the same time, I don't see a dramatic increase in the creative, the creative side of teaching, the creative side of learning, like you said about, developing a product, making a video, those types of pieces. I still feel like we're at this threshold of technology is being used just to substitute what we were doing in the past, to kind of classify it on the SAMR model. I've seen a dramatic increase in the substitution phase, but not getting towards uh, modification or redefinition. And so, what is advice, or what are questions that you ask teachers, or what are things that you do to try to encourage teachers to, start to incorporate more creativity, whether or not it involves technology? But what are those conversations that you facilitate with teachers along those lines?
I think since I do a lot of work with career technical education, I can see what they're doing in the field and how those jobs and careers are changing. And I can talk with someone in the field that's discussing what are the needs, and then how can we then work on something like project-based learning. I think for adults, especially, and in higher education and secondary school, and even I think in elementary and middle schools, is that we focus on this project-based mentality and design thinking, then we can put our students in the position to be more innovative and creative. And it doesn't matter what necessarily the field is or what the content is. I think if you have a variety of different procedures as well as skills that are associated with, creativity, innovation, resilience, growth mindset, those types of characteristics, then you can use something like design thinking, project-based learning, and over time really develop some really cool innovations that students can develop or can showcase to the world. And it could be a fifth grade science project, or it could be an adult in a coding class that codes a new type of program that can be used in a new mobile application. So I mean, there's endless possibilities here, I think.
I think what's really nice in your position is you get to see maybe I'm giving you the credit without actually knowing of seeing what happens in a primary classroom that builds in a mid-level to a high school level and then beyond. And to see that progression, you probably, I mean, when you were going through your introduction, I was like, man, if you were on an admin team, what a resource you would be. And you, I'm sure, support many admin teams. And just that idea of like the definition of scope and sequence, right? Like this is the progression that's necessary. And a lot of that, as you mentioned, is more soft skills, and it's the ability, the content, right? I could be a mechanic, I could be a carpenter, I could be a cook, I could be in academia. It doesn't matter what the content is. It's really the core, questioning skills. How are you interacting in professionalism? The idea of being responsible, all those features that we teach as almost a secondary curriculum, or at least we used to. It was always so much upfront, where we were, here's the assessment anchor, and here's the kind of achievement that I'm accomplishing. and then we'll worry about character traits because we have to each month type situation. So with that being said, I guess I want to tap into this concept of data literacy, which I know that you talked about earlier. And my interpretation is the idea of taking information and being able to understand and really not just see it as numbers in a spreadsheet, but how you use that academically to judge and go forward. Ken will tell you I have a really difficult time with, honestly, even formative assessments. As an educator, I love formative assessments. It's what I want to do. It's what I give a formative assessment. It may be a 2-second or 2-question quiz. It might be auditory, verbal, whatever the case may be, to change my instruction. I'm in a classroom with a scripted program in math and a scripted program in ELA. And essentially an old school FOSS for science. So I feel like my hands are tied, and I'm like, do I break what I'm doing academically because I recognize what my formative assessment told me and feel like I'm almost doing poor by the curriculum director, but still feel like I'm doing the best thing for kids. So I don't know if that completely leans into it, but what are your thoughts on, we're in that position right now of balancing both of those things?
Yeah. So I think for you in your classroom, I mean, if you're using something like that is formative assessment or adaptive, for example, you can see where your students are at, correct? Like you can see on a graph, or you can see kind of like where Johnny and Sally is at regarding solving that particular math problem or set of math problems, etc. So you can see where they're at, and you can see that those data points there. But really, essentially, is you taking those data points and then essentially, okay, what am I going to do with that? What's my decision making going to look like? So say Johnny, Sally, and maybe 3 other students are really struggling in solving addition problems. So what I like to think about pragmatically is, okay, so maybe what are some of the things that may be affecting them in terms of where they're currently at? Maybe they're um, need to get some more modeling or need to work with manipulatives. A tool I like to use is the Learner Variability Navigator from the Digital Promise, which shows you a wide range of strategies that shows essentially, if students are struggling in these areas and these factors that are maybe affecting them learning that particular skill, there's a number of strategies that you can try. So taking that data that you've received from that formative assessment or from the adaptive tools that you have, you can then take that information and find strategies that you can use, whether it's in a small group, whole group, etc., to then try and then look at the formative assessment data again. And to me, that is one aspect of the data literacy piece, is being able to take that data visualization and then thinking about, okay, based on how XYZ is doing or these groups are doing, what type of strategies I know that maybe that could affect where they're currently at in their learning. So that's one element. Another element is basically looking at the data and collecting it. We have all these tools, but I mean, maybe I don't know necessarily how to create a report. So that's another element, being able to take that report and making it a data visualization and being able to see, okay, now I've had all these raw data numbers and I see this visualization now. Maybe that will help me interpret it better to make those decisions. Another element of that data literacy piece, which is more of a, you're looking at the instructional coach or the curriculum director, or, someone that's, in the leadership council, taking that data and transforming it with statistics to see what types of relationships exist amongst various types of groups of students. You could look at the classroom, you could look at, the school, district, etc., and determine what are some maybe variables that are affecting, is there a correlation with that? This school has so many absences, or this this teacher is utilizing this strategy very often, and we can look at another class that's not using this strategy, and then we could possibly randomize. So there's a lot of different levels of it, but I think at the classroom level, the first two examples I gave you are things that I think every teacher should be literate and able to do. And a lot of my work in a project I'm working on is writing a book on data literacy and taking those types of strategies and incorporating it into your practice.
You're speaking to my passions, and I'm gonna make sure I buy that book right after we sign off here, because when I realized the power of data in my classroom, it was a total game changer. I done station rotation for years, and I started to incorporate flipped and blended instruction into my classroom, and I wanted more. I wanted to personalize it just one step further, and when I realized the power of data and the ease in which I could facilitate it through a simple tool of Google Forms, it was a total game changer. And I was teaching 30 kids in a room where I had at most 10 devices. So, in a class where I was nowhere near one to one, it was still incredibly possible because I looked at the technology tool of Google Forms as something that they could get to quickly, they could complete quickly, and I could analyze quickly, and I could make informed decisions quickly. And then my instruction was the meat of the result of that. They would complete the problems or the activities on paper, and then Google Forms was purely just an answer input system to get to me. Something that I tried to further enhance is is I don't know if this is the best way to put it, but I often ask teachers and people like yourself in this area the relationship of students to their own data. What is the appropriate level of that? How much of a relationship should they have with that data? So I would very commonly tell my students, this is a you're taking a test. We haven't learned this yet. I'm not going to share you the scores because you're probably not going to do that well. Some of you might do really well, but I just want to know where we're at, and then I'll be able to move forward with the unit. Versus a mid-unit thing, it was, this is a skill we've been working on. You're going to see your scores at the end, so you know where you're at. I'm going to know where you're at, but I also want you to know how you're doing, with the skills that we're learning in class. And I found that over time, over the course of the year, my students became more passionate about the results they would see. I would commonly have students come up to me and say, Mr. Ehrman, I just submitted activity 7. I bombed it, but I really don't think I was paying attention. Can I submit it again? Absolutely. If you can do it again and you succeed, then that's going to be a more accurate data marker for me. So, what is that appropriate level of the relationship with the student to their own data, or any advice you have along those lines?
Well, I'm kind of in the camp that everything that you do in the class is your own data. Every single action is a data point that we can use to help the student. That kind of my attitude to students is that everything that I am collecting about you, I'm trying to use it to your own benefit to help you. And I like to kind of show them. I show them what I don't have anyone's name associated with it, or I just have the student's name associated with it. What it looks like, and seeing that, seeing those two numbers, or seeing two different pie charts and seeing their growth over time, see that visualization piece. So that kind of helps build that buy-in. And also I think that we need to tell students and everyone involved is that we're using the data to build relationships with you. I'm learning things about you that I may not have any clue about, but now I have the ability to collect this information about you. And you can do it anonymously to no one else in the classroom besides me. I have to know that. And that goes with a lot of the social emotional learning work that we're doing. And to me, that's so powerful. If you're in a class of 42 students now, you can see 42 different responses in real time related to a prompt, discussing maybe how they're doing or how they can relate to certain situations, a social story, whatever. And to me, that helps you build that relationship and build rapport with students because you get to know them more than you ever do. And kind of the scary thought is that with our technology now is that we have the ability to really be in the position to know. It's just where's the point where knowing too much when we talk about, I could say like social media and any sort of data that we're collecting, what is too much. We can go down a conversation with that sometime, but it's a scary amount of data, and if you are able to harness that data, then it can be revolutionary in terms of education. And where we're going with a lot of the technology and the algorithms is they can do a lot of predictions now based on where they're currently at. So we're in a precipice of a really large change in education. That's why I kind of mentioned earlier that there's so much that is increasing ever so quickly in terms of our technology. So really now I think teachers just need to know that you have the ability to collect more data than in history to help support your students and build relationships with them. And I think that if we can essentially have that conversation with the entire school community as well as the student, then I think there can be more buy-in in terms of the technology that we're using, and then the data collection and data literacy piece. And that's kind of the premise of a lot of my work that I'm currently writing and discussing.
All right, so I'm going to share, Matt. My wife and I are both fourth grade teachers in the same exact school district in different buildings. We have very similar student populations, all of those features. I love being able to use her as a resource and her using me as a resource, except for one day of the school year, and that's when our state testing data comes out. And it literally will rank how well I did directly next to how well she did. How do you feel? I think it's beneficial. What I will always say is I always wish I do a little bit worse than her because I can handle it a little bit better than she can. But I still want us to both be successful, right? Like I want us to be in a high percentile, but she just edged me out. Yep, you can take that every single time. Talking about the social and emotional, if I'm struggling myself with taking that data, which happens once a year, and I think Ken, what you were talking about, the relationship, and Matt, what you were saying as well, right? Like having this understanding of what that data means and how it can affect pulling kids. Obviously, goal setting is what's coming to mind for me. If you're not using data to prove goal setting and setting goals and accomplishing them, right now in the school year is a huge goal setting time frame. Right after report cards or throughout the time, hey, let's set a goal that by the time state testing comes, we're ready to go and we're at full cylinders. Two things. How do you handle the honesty of what data tells a kid? Because even a high kid can get a slightly less than perfect score and have as much of a damaging result with that as a middle student that has a really poor performance. So how do you deal with that? And how do you feel you benefit from data literacy when you have such different scenarios? There are so many justifications of reasons things changed. You know what? We had a fire drill this morning, or we had poor weather, or the social event that's going on at school. What happened at home? There are so many justifications that can invalidate data. And I feel like in my 35-year career, I may at 20 years have enough experience in education to say, you know what, they tell me this is the norm. I can actually see it. So that's two loaded questions. Best of luck.
Totally. No. And I think you bring up a good point, and you just argued totally against summative assessment, even though you thought that essentially, you were for them, but you argued against them. So
I should clarify. I much prefer, I think summative assessments are not helpful. What I was more so saying is formative assessments are difficult when you take data from an activity and you're like, oh, well, my kids got this concept, but it tells me I'm supposed to do this 4 more times in the scripted curriculum. So sorry to interrupt.
And no worries. No, and that's kind of essentially why I think summative state testing definitely is. It's really hard barometer to see kind of where everyone's at one point. It's an old school method to determine where everyone's at. Now we have the ability to see where everyone's at that pinpoint in time on Friday or Monday, And I think with the formative assessment piece, it's such a much more powerful way. You're not going to get 100% mastery across the board in that single year. I mean, teachers got to give up that perfectionism. You're not going to do it. Everyone's not going to meet that benchmark. It's just the reality of it, and you have to be okay with it. But what you can set up your students with is that notion is that, if you didn't do well in these formative assessments, or if you're doing it every day, just know that you're going to perform well sometimes, but you're not going to perform well other days. But you can build that mindset and develop the habits to at least be consistent, or have those habits to be semi-consistent in being resilient if things don't go well. I mean, I think where the summative state testing will go in about 5 to 6 years is that we're going to be doing them 5 to 6 times a semester, but they're going to be like 10 minutes. So you can see across the board throughout the year, you can see on a dot on a bar graph, or not bar graph, but on a line graph, the student's going to go up, down, sideways. Learning's like this. It's not like this or this. It looks like a line that's ever so much curving and all over the place. And that's going to be, to me, I think that's a lot more helpful to determine where a student is at throughout the year than just that one point of time. And I think if students can have that mindset that one test per year is not going to define me or anything like that, but rather if they have the mindset that learning is that ever so curvature of a line, then that's going to help them more in life than anything else. And I think in education, we really got to reinforce that, because over the last 10 to 15 years, we've been so much ingrained in these one-time summative assessments, and they're so ever so defining of people in school as well as society. So that's just my point of view, and hopefully that helped answer your question.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope it's moving the way that you're saying, because
I
know
think
Matt
we would
and I
all
are right there with you.
Yeah, we'd celebrate that.
Yeah,
Kind
I
of
hope
on
so.
a follow up to that. One thing that I've seen with whether it be the state tests or district benchmark tests that happen a couple times throughout the year is we're starting to get, like you said, more accurate and more data than we've ever had. And you're getting, very skill specific markers of, students perform well in this skill, they don't perform well in this skill. And as a classroom teacher, I would look at what skills correlate with the unit I'm in. How did my students perform on that, whether it was last year's state test or the beginning of the year assessment, and kind of use that as my entry point, and then continually assess them throughout the unit. But, I've now started to hear conversations of the potential of looking at, and not to be comparison, like you were saying, Matt, with your wife, but, looking at teachers that are teaching maybe the same grade level or the same courses, algebra or pre-calculus or, a history course, and looking at those scores and saying, every year Matt does his students excel at this unit, and Ken seems to always have low scores in this unit. And maybe then there's a flip flop of other units, but getting, Matt to work with me and say, hey, this is how I teach this skill. This is where I found that students were constantly hung up on, and this is how I adjusted my instruction. Have you been involved in any of those conversations, or have you seen that develop in any of the areas that you work with, where we're getting teachers to be okay with being vulnerable with the data that's, kind of eliciting towards their teaching, and getting them to be more collaborative and supporting each other?
I haven't been fully in those conversations quite yet, but I've definitely, we want to get to that point. And I think with building that coaching relationship, and I think the administrators need to build that same type of trusting and relationship and that rapport with the teacher, just to to have that conversation with them. And that's okay, because everyone has their own strengths and areas of improvement. And I think that we may get to the point where, say Matt comes into Ken's class and teaches that unit, and then Ken goes teaches in Matt's class another unit that's, throughout the year. Maybe not having that single teacher throughout the year could be, beneficial, because every teacher has their own strengths. And in life, you're going to be with people that have various types of ability levels, strengths, and areas of improvement that you're going to be working with, different types of teams and whatnot. And I think that where we're currently at, I think we do have the ability, if the schools have that alignment in that curriculum, where that could happen. So, but I think it just all goes back to the trust and relationships and rapport piece, and hopefully, when those conversations happen, there can be someone like Matt that can come in and maybe we give Ken the opportunity to go observe Matt, give him that time to go see what he's doing and how he can improve. So that's kind of just how I feel about that.
Can I challenge you in your role specifically as a tech integrator? What are you benefiting from in data literacy? Because you don't necessarily have the same access to kids in the way that I do necessarily. You may be depending on me to provide you that data. What is, as a tech coach, is are you do you view your role as more acquiring and developing lessons, assisting educators understand how to get formative assessment data to adjust? What, in your role, how are you using data literacy fluently?
Yeah, so I'm essentially collecting data on every single teacher that I'm working with, whether that is quantitative through a rubric that I am placing off my data points, as well as qualitative. So I'm able to see kind of all of my types of interactions. What am I doing with them? And then I am assessing them based on where they're currently at. And maybe we're doing a specific coaching cycle or working on a specific, you know, assessment. And we're focusing based on a number of key um, elements on the rubric. And I can see where we go based on a number of observations in our coaching conversations. And I can see that. Since I'm no longer in K-12, I can't see all of the iReady data, but I could take something like iReady and I could look at all my coaching data that I can see and see whether I can find any sort of correlation between the types of lessons that they're doing well on or assessments using that tool in the coaching that I'm doing. So there's a lot that we can collect. There's a lot of different types of tools that you can look at engagement on like a learning management system and seeing kind of how well they're scoring in the grade book. You can do a lot of different visualizations with that. Schoolytics is a great tool for that, for Google Classroom. And just for the coaching piece, I want to shout out to Connect Hub because they're the tool that I use for my data collection and visualization with my coaching piece. So I think 5-10 years ago, I couldn't see the data, but now I can see almost everything if I have full admin access. And that can really help me in my day-to-day and my coaching.
Yeah, it's an important piece, but I didn't even think about all those analytics that you were saying about the interaction with the LMS, and those are things that I'm going to bring back to my team. Because I'm going to re-listen to what you said because I want to process that again. And I didn't think about that in terms of how we can bring that to our teachers and the type of data and information that we can try to pull from that, aside from the typical scores on state tests and district benchmarks and that type of thing. And the last thing I'd like to say, and Matt, please feel free to jump in if you want. Talking to Matt R here, is getting teachers to just grasp the idea that every year, whether it's a new year or it's a new semester, new marking period, your kids aren't the same, and just having simple data markers, quick formative assessments, pre-tests for every unit, something simple to see where your students are at. Because if you start to do it year after year, you're going to find that you have students that are coming in at extremely different levels. You'll have classes where you have a huge variety. You have a lot of low kids, you have a lot of middle kids and high kids, and you have other years where they're all high or they're all low, or there's always just a mix. And when I was in my 5th, 6th, 7th year teaching the same 5th grade math, it was a huge advantage to me when I had that data, and I would give a very similar test every year before units to see where they were at. And I would know before the unit started how fast I was going to go through it. If it was going to be much slower than it typically was, or I was going to be able to accelerate it based on the students that I had. And, just recognizing and realizing that every year, or if you're a secondary teacher and you teach 3 sections, your sections are going to be different. And, you may realize that when you're halfway through the year, but why not find that out before you start every unit? It's just so important to be able to provide a better form of instruction to your students.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at. I mean, this is just a bread and butter thing I like to do is a formative assessment with, for example, Pear Deck or Nearpod. I mean, solving a math problem or a simple grammar or a writing prompt, and doing a strategy like think, pair, share, and essentially you could have the students. I like to do this type of this type of protocol: think, solve, pair, share. So essentially, you can have them think, and then you have them solve, and then you as a teacher can see all the information coming in and seeing where they're at relating to maybe one or two problems, and then having the students share and looking at the two problems that they're working on, or that one problem, and then determining, are there any errors there, or what are some things that are currently working on that we need to do, or did we solve this correctly? Then coming back and bring it in a class, the teacher first can provide some quick feedback. What are 2 or 3 things that I noticed that that were going on in terms of that problem? What were the common errors that I saw, or what were the common things that I felt that were helpful in solving it? Then I would call on one group that maybe necessarily didn't solve it correctly, but solved it in a way that which was really interesting. Then I would call on another group that would be the one that solved it correctly. So that's a really good strategy where I can see the formative assessment data, but then I can see a lot of different types of thinking. And you can do that really quickly. I mean, within 8-10 minutes when you get down that strategy. So that's just, an example of just being able to see a great strategy and seeing all those data points right there with that type of tool and seeing that type of work take place.
All right, I'm going to throw a curveball right before we jump into our exit ticket, if that's all right. And hopefully this doesn't get too personal by any means, but when I was checking out your website, I noticed that you recently had done a podcast with a friend of ours, Dr. Sam Fesich from Grove City. Ken and I did a summer experience, and she came, and she's been on our podcast. She's wonderful. I do student teaching, a field placement for her. And I know that both of you have a background in special education. And I'm just going to take a hunch as a former special ed teacher, but also a former special ed student who, like I believe you in that episode, shared that you kind of tested out of that, really drives the idea of standards and data to kind of normal. At least in my educational journey, it was, I know that I had a lot of academic ability, but it needed to be channeled in the right way to see success. So finding that pathway, navigating that direction was super important. And that led to my complete passion in education. Trying to guide other educators, other students to really tap into the okay, I can acknowledge how I best learn. How can I create that to be a winning success? Leads into a passion. Without you driving into maybe a big story, can you kind of talk about how it's okay to take your personal experience and let it be a big passion as an educator? Because I think that that's where best education comes from, is when what you're doing your job, but you're also bringing this extra like emphasis and quality because it's a passion project, and that's okay.
Yeah, and for my own personal experience, it came down to teachers believing in me and having, building up my efficacy in everything that I was doing, whether that was social, whether that was emotional, whether that was academic. And to me, having those experiences of someone believing in me and giving me opportunities gave me that passion for wanting to come into education and work with students with special needs and just students in general as well. Because in life, you always want to have that one person or multiple people in your life telling you, they believe in you and you're doing good work. They see that potential in you. They see, they see your strengths. They see where you can improve at, but they lift you. And I think that those types of experiences, a lot of educators can share in their own lives as well as working with students. And I think that coming into education with those types of experiences, definitely leads to different passions and just being able to uplift others. And I think that that's you know I think one of the missions of education is to uplift, and and through that uplifting, it allows people to, regardless of where their background is, their ability levels, or whom they are, hopefully give them that opportunity to take that and do something that they are passionate about and do something that they enjoy doing, and can move forward in life with those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, if we can help a student find their passion, find their drive, I mean, there's nothing better than that. So that was a good curveball, Matt. So we're gonna jump into our exit ticket. Same four questions we ask every guest every week. Question number one: what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better? Might be just what you said.
Yeah, so essentially just that belief, just that one or two things that you can say at the end of each class or during the class that that student is doing well in, or just that belief in them, then to me that will improve the student's experience, especially if you have multiple people throughout the day doing that to that student, because maybe that's the only time that they hear that that day.
Our second question may still be related, but maybe not. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received? And it could be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student that you still think of today.
I think the best piece of advice that I've ever had is that work harder than everyone else, but at the same time, I think be strategic in what you're working hard in. Think about what you're doing and how you can improve those, the systems of being good at something. For example, when you're shooting a basket, you always have to look at your form. You have to look at your footwork. You have to look at, are you leaning forward or are you leaning backwards? You can shoot 1,000 shots, but if you're not doing those things each and every time, then are you going to get better at shooting? Maybe not, or maybe nominal difference. But to me, that goes for anything in life. And if we take that into account, we can, I think we can improve our practices and improve our well-being.
That's great. So we're catching you at a good time because I know you're not quite back in session yet, but I'm sure in a week or two from now you'll be in the really the deep end, getting back into instruction. So the school year goes in waves, and there are days that we struggle and we're just trying to survive. What is something that every educator could listen to or hear to help them power through those moments of struggle?
Oh man, there's so many educators doing so many great things that they could listen to. So I would say recently, who I've really enjoyed the material is and he's always produced really good stuff, is just listening to George Koros, Innovators Mindset podcast. He's produced some really good things recently, not just about education in general, but just overall well-being, which I think that are just really positive and uplifting. And I think does he's real about things, but he's relatively optimistic and has a viewpoint. He's definitely a standout that I like to listen to. And then I also like to listen to the Che and Pav show, which is they're very entertaining, but they're always pretty uplifting and optimistic. But I'd say outside of just education realm, just listening to something, or just I would say listen to upbeat music. I like to get on my Peloton and do a house ride just to get my mind off things. But those are just a few things that I like to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely look up George Couros if you've never heard of him. I know Matt and I have actually we both went to his keynote at a Pennsylvania conference, and he was fantastic. I had seen him speak, I think 2 years before that at ISTE. He's fantastic. Like you said, he's very optimistic, but also very realistic. And he's a great read. He's a great listen. He's definitely someone to follow up on. So last question. It is easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What is it that you think separates teachers who are the ones constantly seeking change, innovation, and new teaching strategies?
I would say that teachers that are trying to do things that are repetitive are just surviving. They're not thriving. But when teachers are providing that innovative and creative space, where students have the choice to do creative and innovative things, they're thriving, and they're providing that opportunity for students. And surviving doesn't just mean that you're just getting by, or it's a really difficult time, or maybe you've lost that spark, and you just need to have that spark or that fire relit, right? So that's just an example there. So yeah, those are just my feelings towards that.
So you're obviously working on some great things, and for a classroom teacher, maybe some unconventional groups of pre-educators and adult education, what have you. How can we continue to tune in and keep tabs on the things that you're working on, whether it's data literacy, and continue to learn from you?
Yeah, so you can check out my website at matthewrhoads.com. I have my book that came out in July, Navigating the Toggle Term, a guide for K-12 classroom and school leaders, which really elaborates on many things that we discussed. And then I have a series of 4 books coming out with EduMatch this next year on Amplify Learning, a global collaborative, as well as another book called Instruction Without Boundaries. And I have a few other projects with data literacy and new teacher stuff. But I try and blog like once or twice every month, and really looking forward to season 2 of my podcast coming out in February, where it'll be live. So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome. That's a lot for us to follow up to, and congrats on the previous book and the upcoming ones. So everything that you just shared, I'll link your website, your books, and your podcast, and everything on our show notes page, which can be found at powereduup.com/show53. Matt, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been a fantastic show. I look forward to going back and re-listening to a lot of what you said as I edit it to get it ready. But you're clearly doing a lot of positive things for the teachers and the students that you work with, and having a huge positive impact. And those colleagues that you have are very lucky to have you in their circle. So thank you everyone for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube or subscribing on a podcast app, please subscribe if you have not. Follow us on social media at powereduup.com, and just continue to tune in with us and listen to the amazing educators that Matt and I have the pleasure of speaking to every week. So, Mr. Rogers, why don't you take us on out of here?
Nice clarification, Ken. So everyone stay well. I know it's kind of a tough time of year, and staying kind of ready for all sorts of changes is hard to do. So take care of yourself, plenty of sleep, and check in on coworkers, and we'll get through it all, and it'll be summer before we know it, right? As we're recording this in January 4th. So, Matt, thank you so much for the time. And as we power down this episode, you did a great job of powering us up. So we will talk to you guys next week.